live, laugh.
How's it going, everybody? I am joined tonight by referee Kevin Pierce. You've seen him all over the place. If you're in the East Coast, you've seen him. If you're a fan of New Japan, you've seen him. If you're a fan of Impact, you've probably seen him at some point as well. How are you doing tonight, Kevin?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. Of course. So I want to start out with something because I don't know where it fits into your story, but you're the first referee that we've ever had that has refereed a match that involved a drone.
You remember that, right?
Yeah. So, what was that like? And is that the favorite match that you've ever done?
That was an interesting day. No, I had never worked with a drone before. It was funny because it was my first time getting to work in a movie-like setting, because when we filmed it, we didn't film it like it was an episode of television. We filmed it like it was a movie. So they had the speaker in the back of the room, and every now and again you'd hear the director go, "Hold, please." And we'd have to stop what we were doing. They would go and conversate and then come back and, "All right, guys, we're going to do it again." And we had to go back to where we were standing at the beginning of the shot.
Yeah.
So it was like way more to have to remember instead of like in a regular match where you just go.
Yeah, you just go.
Right. And that was a fun day. The drone definitely won at the end of the day. But that was a fun experience. And then it was heavier than I thought it was going to be.
Really?
It's like as soon as I grabbed it, I had to almost reset myself when I was on the floor, because I was like, wow, these things are heavy. Like that was the first time I had touched the drone all day when we filmed it.
Yeah. You didn't get to go over the match beforehand with them.
No, like we talked to him, but I never actually touched the drone until the spot. And we filmed it 2 or 3 times, so I don't know which take they ended up using, but by the second or third one, I had a firm grip on it. that first one, I almost dropped it.
Yeah. So I might have it here. So when this podcast started out, we were doing like reviews. Okay. So we would like review crazy episodes of the thing, and the last, we never actually recorded it, but we did. Here, I have like a little.
On behalf of.
Oops.
But now it is time.
I have like a bunch of clips on here from that episode of TNA, ironically, but we never actually did the episode, so I've just got like.
Special report.
Welcome back to WCAM Action News.
Put it all on there. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say that with that day, we filmed the episode of television itself was a full episode of Impact. So throughout the scheduled matches, you had Abyss and Crazy Steve going through the compound, running into different obstacles. And I would be the referee that once they defeated that obstacle would come running out of the bushes and go to count. And I was counting in the driveway where the gate is. And I'm counting so hard that, like, as soon as I got up, I started pulling pebbles out of my hand. Like,
oh, no.
But that was a lot of fun. It was a cold night too, and I remember I was out there in full ref gear, which is basically just like a uniform, and I'm freezing. So these guys who were in their underwear, basically, I knew they had got to be cold. Like there's just no way around it. But we all made it through.
Yeah, there was a water spot at some point, I think.
So Crazy Steve in like the mist or something.
Yes,
and you could see the steam coming off of the guy.
That's awesome. We could touch a little bit more on that later, but that was at a moment I was like, "Is that Kevin Pierce?" And I kept watching. I was like, "Yep." So that was a really cool experience. But to kind of go back to the beginning for you with wrestling, where was that moment that you were first introduced with wrestling, and how long did it take for you until you were just like, "I'm hooked"?
I was hooked immediately. The first time I ever watched wrestling was in 1996. And I remember it specifically because it was the first night that Scott Hall showed up. It was in May, I believe. And I just remember not knowing who this person was. Like, I had no backstory or anything, but I was like, this guy just disrupted the whole TV show. Like, nobody just like walks in the middle of a scene of a movie and it's like, hey, real quick, I've got a question for you, you know? And so I was immediately intrigued. And then we just started watching Nitro, and I originally grew up in Augusta, Georgia, so like WCW was huge down there. I didn't know WWE was a thing until I was 12. Like I was that sheltered in the little area that we were as far as wrestling went. And the only reason I found that out was because I was flipped through the channels, and it was the night that the NWO showed up on Raw. I'm like, okay, well, I know NWO. Okay, they must be on this different. I thought it was just another version of WCW. I had no idea. A whole new world opened up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really a great time to join into, like right at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah. What were some of the characters that like drew you in originally?
I had never seen the multicolored face paint Sting. So my introduction to Sting was the black and white Sting.
Yeah.
Because he had just started to turn right around the time I started watching. I was just enamored with the fact that somebody could walk into a room or any place, not say a word, and have everybody's attention.
Yeah.
That was impressive to me as a kid. It was like, I'm sitting here screaming at the top of my lungs and I can't get anybody's attention. And here he is. He just walks in the room, nothing, and he's got everybody.
That's so funny because like a lot of times the people we talk to, the first moment that they had that really caught them was like The Undertaker.
Yep.
But yours was very similar. It's just on a different brand where you've got this guy who kind of does his talking with his actions and is kind of be and like always look up, and he's in the Raptors. Like
I really learned about selling at that point because, you know, like he could just tell a story with his face and not have to say a word.
Yeah.
Great learning experience.
Oh yeah, for sure. Would you say that it was like the larger than life characters, or was it the in-ring work that kind of drew you in?
I'm a production guy. Like I'm a huge proponent of the guys that do all the things that nobody sees. And I kind of wanted to be that guy. Like, you know, in Full Metal Jacket, when they were talking to reporters, one of the reporters like, I prefer to be in the rear with the gear, and then I'm like, that's me. Like I'm back there with all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the production of it, like how clean everything looked as far as lines and angles, and just the viewer experience. Because I want to say as a kid, I saw wrestling live maybe 2 or 3 times, and that was WCW coming to our local civic center, you know. So being the fan that always had to experience it at home, I always appreciated that on a greater level, and I wanted to know who these people were. And lucky for me, back in the day in the pay-per-view, there was a scroll that told me exactly who these people were. And I was like, all right, cool. So I know who Craig Leathers is. All right, I'm going to remember that name. You know, it's like, and the cool thing about that is it kind of came full circle. I was working a show in Wilmington, North Carolina, and Bill Apter was there. And I was doing my usual stuff, running around, getting zip ties, duct tape, everything, you know, just trying to clean everything up. And Bill Apter walked over to me and he said, do you know who you remind me of? And I said, no, sir, who? And he goes, Craig Leathers. And I'm like, I've known that name since I was a kid. Yes. That was like just a personal achievement like that.
Yeah.
And I guarantee maybe 90% of the people in the room didn't know who Craig Leathers was, but I did. So I was like, all right, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Of all the people for him to say, like, he found the perfect.
Right.
That's awesome. So you're watching wrestling. Has it always been an obsession? Is there a point where you decided you wanted to take a break, or is it always just been wrestling for you?
It's always been wrestling. Once I graduated high school, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't know how I was going to do it.
Yeah.
But luckily there was a training school in Atlanta, and I was able to finagle my way in there. And like the one thing that I learned there more than anything else, or my introduction, was working on television. Because, you know, eventually if you want to make money in this business, you have to know how to do that.
Yeah.
And just the different experiences with the different companies I've had the chance to work with, like just learning how everybody does television differently. Like WWE does television far different than Impact, and Impact does it different than New Japan.
Yeah.
But everybody has their own style, and if you can be adaptable and mesh with each one, then even better chance for you to keep a job.
Of course, yeah. But I think you've proved that you're able to do that. Your resume speaks for itself. But going back to when you started wrestling school, was the intention always to be a referee, or?
I had never, ever intended, I'll be honest with you, I had never intended to be a referee. That was never on, I didn't even think of it as an option.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a manager. I wanted to be a mouthpiece. So when I started out, I was I played sort of the evil GM boss wherever I went. And it was just a thing where, not to dive too deep into it, but I didn't have the greatest upbringing. So to say the least, I had the perfect example of what an asshole looks and sounds like.
Yeah.
So I know how to piss people off immediately because I've seen somebody do it multiple times. And I'm like, okay, if I just do what they did, but in a wrestling context, maybe I can piss these people off. And it worked. And then I was working a show and someone walked up to me and they said, hey, I know you're doing the manager thing and I know you're doing the GM spots. But when was the last time you read an article, indie wrestling manager hired by WWE? And I was like, I don't think I've ever read that. And he goes, exactly. He said, but they do hire referees. He said, why don't you give that a shot? And I was like, okay. So I tried it. The first match that I did, I broke, like when I train referees, if I saw a trainee doing this, I would chew them out. So, but I did it myself. Yeah. In my very first, I'm wearing bright white shoes, bright white socks. My pants don't fit. My belt didn't work. Like just everything that could go wrong with my uniform just didn't work. But it was one of those things where it became, I figured out about myself that I enjoy a challenge. And so when I figured out that at the time I weighed about 250 pounds. And so I was getting pissed off that I couldn't keep up with these wrestlers. I was just like, it just bugged me personally. I don't know what, and it wasn't one particular wrestler, just the fact that I felt like I couldn't keep up with anybody. I was like, oh, hell no, we're going to change this. And then that's where the whole reffing thing started. And then once I got with PWX and I was with them for about 6 years, that was where I was given the freedom to not only use my ideas as far as the setup was concerned, but I was also allowed to still be the referee and get that workout as well. So I had a tremendous amount of time learning at PWX.
Nice. To take it a little bit back further, how does training differ for somebody that wants to be a manager? I'm sure a lot of places are different, but for a lot of the stories that we hear are people like running the ropes, taking bumps. So what does the first day look like for you as a manager in training?
So the way that I was trained was all through, I didn't do classes. So when I went to the WWA 4 in Atlanta, and at the time I was dead broke. I mean, I had enough money to put gas in my car to get to the building and get back home. And so, but I had a bunch of audio equipment like speakers and mics and cables that I just had hoarded because I'm an audiophile.
Yeah.
And so I walked up to Mr. Hughes, who was training, and I said, hey, I don't have the money to pay for classes, but I understand you do a free show every Thursday for your students. If you would allow me to be a part of that show in some way, shape, or form, I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
I have this equipment that you can use. And so we had kind of little trade deal. And I was the guy at first who was behind the mixing board, plugging in cell phones, being like, what's your passcode? I got to get, like that. That was the first thing. And then there was a night where the guy who was supposed to announce with Mr. Hughes didn't show. And so he looks at me and he goes, have you ever done commentary before? And like anybody who wants to get a job anywhere, they, of course, yeah. Never touched commentary a day in my life. I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
And he goes, all right, you're doing commentary tonight. And he just made it so easy because he would end all of his statements. They were all ended his questions. So I had somewhere to go with it. And he's like, all right, so what's going to happen? And this is how rinky dink it was. And I love this about it because hey, if it works, it works. We did our commentary by standing behind a tripod camera that was filming the match itself. We were actually just standing behind the hard cam doing our commentary that way. There were no mics, there were no headsets, no monitors. We're just watching the match. And he was like, anytime it's time for you to talk, I'll tap you on the arm. I was like, good, bet, I can do that.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Especially like we've heard of a lot of people. I don't say a lot of people. I think Caleb Conley trained a little bit with Mr. Hughes when he started out.
Yep.
But he definitely has that training impact. So where do you go from there to like now you're on like an involved character in the promotion?
So there was a company in Royston, Georgia called APW. And I was they first brought me in as the assistant director of human resources. I'm like, this is an indie show. We're doing way too much right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I came in and then I was basically kind of like the network to Paul Heyman. I was the one going, hey, you can't do this. That's against regulation,
Yeah.
And we built it up to where it was a 3-match series, and which I had never wrestled at, and I just knew that I had heard Jim Ross say years ago that any heel worth their salt knows that people will pay money to see them get their ass whooped. So I'm like, all right, I got to take one. So we had a cage match, got my ass whooped in that thing. And it was cool because when we first started going, the crowd was maybe 20, 30 people. By the time we got to the cage match, we're looking at like 150. And I was like, okay, it's like in my mind, I'm like, okay, that's progress. That means I can do it. The numbers may not be huge, but at least not in this area, but I can do it. I did help increase the audience because I got kicked out of Waffle Houses in that town because all the fans would go to the Waffle House after the show, and I didn't know that. So I just stopped by to get some food, and I hear Pierce, Pierce, Pierce from 3 different parts of the room. And these people are coming at me with, like they're upset about it. And I want to say that night all I did was throw the guy out of the building because he was double booked.
Yeah.
That's all I did. And they were furious. And but that's the country crowd for you. And I won't say country, I'll say rural.
Yeah, rural. Yeah, definitely. That's the crowd where you have my favorite part of wrestling, like my favorite wrestling fan, which is the elderly lady.
Yes.
Who is so involved that she's screaming at the wrestlers and she's getting fights. Like the last person you'd ever expect to be like screaming at a wrestler is.
And she's probably screaming at the ref, knowing Georgia wrestling.
Yeah. Does it piss you like just a sidebar with referee, like there's a certain amount of like dramatics involved. Like, of course you're supposed to look the other way, but like all the shows we're at, we're like, come on, ref. Like, I don't like, how does that make you feel? Do you feel like that's a part of your job, or how is that viewed? Is that something that annoys you?
I will be honest. At first, it did make me angry a little bit, but then I was like, I realized that if I'm hearing, it depends on what I'm hearing. If I'm hearing certain things, like the one that I can't, and I guarantee if I say this, it'll probably start a chant or something at the next show. But the one that I can't personally stand is That Was 3. I'm like, motherfucker, if you know how hard it is to get close and then have to yank that son of a bitch back, it's like, oh man. Like, other than that, like usually it's in a spot where like the ref, goes down and then a bunch of stuff happens behind me and I don't see it. The one I can't personally stand is when, hey, go look over there, and the ref just yell. Yeah. Like, come on. Like, that would never happen in a real fight. Now, if you threw something at him and he had to catch it and he comes this way, there's a magic and a science to what we do. And there's for most ideas, there's a way to do it. You just have to do it in a specific way so that way it makes sense. Yeah. Sorry, I sidebarred too.
No, I'm about to do it again. It was my co-host, actually. We were at a hockey game, and he looked over at me. He's like, can you imagine if all refs were like wrestling referees? Like a football ref just like actually get knocked out, and he's there for 10 minutes on the sideline.
Right. Like there's a touchdown, and you just see somebody doing this for ring the bell.
That was just a funny thought that I thought, like, especially with like a football ref, like in the middle of the field, they're just playing around them. And,
right.
But yeah. I guess we could go back 3 sidebars ago. So this is the promotion that you kind of start refereeing with?
Yeah, PWX was the first one that I really started like reffing full time. The first time I reffed was in my hometown, and that was the night where the guy pulled me aside and told me about possibly being a referee because he saw something in the work that I did that night. Yeah. And so I started mainly with PWX, and then when PWX around 2019 got to working with New Japan, then they brought me on for that to build all the sets and to ref for them. And honestly, like, it was bittersweet because like I wanted to be that guy that started working with them, and then I got like the first couple of opening matches, or I got the dark matches, and I worked my way to the middle, and then from the middle to the top. But the problem was because of the way that I worked, that wasn't going to happen. Yeah. So usually there's 3 referees whenever we would do an East Coast tour, and there'd be like the first 3 matches would go to the first ref, the next 3 matches would go to the second ref, and then the last 3 matches would go to the main event ref. Yeah. And so because they didn't want me to be overworked, because I was the one doing the load in and the setup and the tear down, they put me in the middle every time so I could rest at the beginning and I could rest at the end before I had to go out there and tear all the stuff down. Yeah. And luckily, Brian Kanabrowski, when we were in Philadelphia, he stuck his neck out for me and like kind of went to the office and was like, hey, like, can we just give him main event matches like just one time? And so I ended up getting Tanahashi's match. I got Suzuki's match, and then I got Will Ospreay's match. And it was funny because of all the ones of all three, I was most nervous to work with Ospreay.
Yeah.
Like, watching him call a match is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. He's like a hummingbird. And he's, okay, so you're gonna do this, and we're gonna go over here, and we're gonna do this, but at any point, if you have any questions, he'll stop, rewind, and then play it back in regular speed.
Yeah.
And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. What was you said this was around 2019?
So we started with him in 2019, and then I've been with him. I want to say we did one show in 2020, like the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And then came back in 21, worked with him in 22. And then since my diagnosis, I haven't been able really to work with anybody. But
yeah,
I'm still in good standing with him, I hope.
Yeah. Sure. It's always nice to see you at those shows. I think we were able to go to like the one that was in Charlotte recently.
Okay. Was that Grady Cole?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also ring announced. I think I ring announced for him that night.
Yeah. So, I think you were at the table.
That table is tiny too, and it is strong. You know, they talk about the Japanese tables. They shipped a couple over here, and they are strong.
That's wild. I would have thought that they would have shipped even the tables over. But
they ship everything. I want to say when we did the show in Chicago, they actually had, instead of us bringing a ring from Charlotte to Chicago, they brought the ring from LA, from the dojo to Chicago. Cool. So we actually first time I actually got to work with New Japan ring, and theirs are 22 by 22.
Yeah,
those things are huge.
Yeah, some of the things that you've mentioned, which are things that people probably don't think about for referees, which is like you think of referees, they're just there for the match, but like you also have goals, you also have aspirations, but like working the main event, like that's something to me that I would like. It makes sense that that's important to you, but it's not something I necessarily would have thought about. What was the first time that you got to work a main event of a show, and what was that like?
Oh, it was nerve-wracking because the one thing you don't want to do is mess up. And any referee that I train, I tell them, remember, when you go out there, you're the only one that's going out there with insurance. And that's the rules. As long as you follow the rules, you are golden.
Yeah.
So as you step out of that, that's when you run into trouble. Perfect. As an example, when we were in Chicago, the main event was Ospreay versus Moxley, and I'm sitting ringside. And they want you attentive if you're ringing that bell. And it's a gong, and it's about 30 pounds. It's solid brass. And you have to hit it so hard that at times they've broken the hammer. And so they have backup hammers, but you really have to hit that thing.
Yeah.
And so the whole time I'm standing there with the hammer in my hand, anytime there's a 2 count, the referee has to look at me. And if I'm not standing right here, I'm going to hear something about it.
Yeah.
And that's how serious they take it. And the finish was supposed to be DDT, cover, 1-2 kick out into a submission immediately, and then a tap out. Brother never kicked out, and so he hit 3. So then he looks at me, says, ring the bell. And so I rang the bell. And in front of me, I've got my notes, I've got the gong, and I've got my phone posted up because the New Japan office will text me just different things that they want to add throughout the night, if anything else I need to say. And I got a text in all caps that said, did you ring the bell too early? I was like, no. And I start immediately looking around for witnesses. I'm like, all right, I know you. You're at my hotel. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So if anybody, I know for a fact you motherfuckers heard him say, ring that bell. I'm not getting chewed out alone here. Like, it was the funny thing was later that night, about 2 hours later, I'm laying in my hotel bed and I get a text from that same referee. And it was a text, and then immediately followed behind it a video. And so I played the video first before I read the text, and it was a slowed down version, frame by frame, of his hand. And you see his hand hit 3.
Yeah.
Brother didn't kick out.
Yeah.
And then I exited the video, and I read the text, and it just goes, "Fuck it, we were right." And it's like, yes, all right, cool. We're going into court with some evidence. I'm okay with this.
How do you recover from that? Is that something like I know sometimes like things are reversed, but like where do you go from after that point?
If it wasn't a situation where the bell rang, there's 2 things you can do. Well, mainly one thing you can do. if let's say I did a near fall and it was 1-2 and my hand looks like it, or maybe even hit it and you heard the sound, that's when you jump up immediately and you start waving it off.
Yeah.
Like we DPW had a tag match with Jay Malachi, and he was supposed to have a partner. I think he didn't show up or showed up late. And versus Lucky and BK. I want to say it was when he teamed with Bojack, actually.
Yeah. It was at the Durham Armory. Yeah.
So Malachi goes to feign the knee injury so that way he can leave to go up to the balcony for his balcony spot.
Yeah.
And so he goes down, and I threw up the X. I was told by the office to throw up the X. They knew it was coming. I forgot to tell the guy ringing the bell.
Uh-huh.
So I throw it up, and all of a sudden, ding, 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 bell rings. I'm like, whoa, no, we're not done. We got another 12 minutes. Like we got time to fill here. Like, and so like luckily they were able to edit out the bell ringing for the post view. Like it was a thing where because everybody heard it and they were all kind of looking at each other. Lucky Ali, who's a goat and a saint, I love him to death.
Yeah.
He says out loud, "Is this match over?" And I was like, my dude, I got you. No, this match is not over. I did not ring that bell. Boom. Everybody's on the same page. We can keep moving forward.
What a pro.
Yeah, dude, ultimate pro. Pro.
It's kind of sidebar again here. So my co-host Christian, we worked a show, like we did like a social media, like kind of like what LeBron Cozone does. Like where he puts the clips up. We were helping out doing that for the show. And right before the show started, the referee looks around and is like, we don't have anybody to ring the bell. So Christian, never having to do this before, is now in charge of ringing the bell.
That's awesome.
And he's getting yelled at, and he finally figures it out. But I have a video of him ringing the bell. And if I could play it for you, would you mind offering any critiques for him on how he
can?
Okay.
Sure.
It's 3 seconds. I'll play it. Maybe I'll play it twice if you need me to.
Okay.
But here goes nothing.
Oh. Okay. Okay. So I will say that each bell is different. So for a regular run-of-the-mill, ring bell, you want to hit it on the side.
Yeah.
But the problem was, let me see if I can find. He had what looked like almost like a tool of some sort. So instead of hitting it, he was hitting it with the flat side instead of the rounded side. But again, you didn't have the best equipment. But with like the New Japan, you don't hit it on the side. You hit it on the top.
Yeah.
Because that's what the way it's built is built differently. So you have to hit it on the top. And I mean, like I said, you have to hit that sumbitch. Yeah. For it to make. I've actually gotten texts before in all caps going, "Hit the bell harder." I'm like, okay.
Awesome. I think he'll find solace in knowing that you've also had the hit the bell harder critique.
Oh, absolutely. I've gotten chewed out for it. Not too much. I haven't gotten chewed out for.
Awesome. Another sidebar. What are your thoughts on places like GCW just having an audio of the bell that they play?
Pro wrestling is like ice cream. There are many different flavors, and there are some people that are allergic to certain flavors, and there are some people that have their favorites. And no matter how many new flavors come out, they're not going to step away from their favorite. Like if they like chocolate, they like chocolate. Period. That's what it is. So I wouldn't. With them not being on like cable television, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense from a financial standpoint. That's much cheaper than having to hire somebody to do that because whoever's next to that laptop is probably running music too. Yeah. So you've now consolidated that. So from a business standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world. It, depending on the clip itself, it depends on the scenario that you run into. Because like if you have the sound that just goes ding, 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 and that's your match. Well, let's say you have a spiel or something on the outside after a match, and and the referee's going, ring the bell. Is it just going to go ding, ding, ding? Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. No, you would hear that ding, 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 like the continuous. Yep. So like it depends on the situation. So if they were paid attention to that scenario, then yeah.
Okay. I have another sidebar. I'm so sorry. We were 5
You're
sidebar.
Good.
So you're talking about like when there's a skirmish or there's somebody trying to break it up and they're ringing the bell. What is that supposed to do?
So in a perfect world, the referees never get touched and the bell is always adhered to.
Okay.
But what it's almost, it was used as a signal to call out other referees.
Okay.
So like in WWE or Evolve, because I worked with Evolve one time when they did a double shot with PWX, and thing that I learned, one of the many things that I learned there was that you keep your earpiece in all night, because you could be in the back talking to somebody and all of a sudden, hey, we need all referees to the ring right now. Boom, you got to go, no matter where you're standing, no matter what you're doing. So that was used back in the day as that, since there were no radios, ding, 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 ding. The minute you hear the multiple dings, you need to start running because somebody's broke into a fight.
Okay.
It's almost like the fight bell.
Yeah. That makes a lot more sense because like it always happens, and then you like it'll ring for a little bit, and then it keeps going, and then it'll ring for a bit, and it keeps going.
Right.
So
it's like sometimes some place might have so many referees that they chop them up in waves. So like the first series of dings, okay, that's wave 1.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not enough to break this fight up. We need wave 2. Boom, send them in.
Yeah.
So
awesome. That was very insightful. I'm trying to remember where we were before this. Main event, working a main event.
Right.
So was your first main event for New Japan, or have you worked main events before that?
Oh, and I did a lot of the main events for PWX because for a while we were kind of short-staffed on the ref side. So there were like 3 or 4 shows where I was the only referee. So I just literally through seniority and just having been there as long as I had been there, I ended up working a lot of the main events. But I also, as I booked the referees, my goal was to never book based on, necessarily where I wanted to be. It was about who fits this match better.
Yeah.
So like I feel like I have certain strengths that other referees don't have, but they also have strengths that I don't have.
Yeah.
So like I know for a fact when it comes to like a submission match, I know there are plenty of referees who are really good in that spot because they know where to be as far as their positioning, and they know how to add to that moment as the guy's crawling to the rope, And so I always try to book referees as to where it would be best for the show, as opposed to where I personally. And to be honest with you, a lot of times they did a much better job than I did.
Yeah,
much better, and it was all because they were in their element. Like it's where I put them in their niche. Was always my goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. PWX it's almost kind of like this weird like thing that existed like in itself. Like, yes, it was an indie promotion, but it was something bigger.
Right.
It was like the PWG for this area. Like it was more than just a regular indie. It was almost like an honor to like work there. They had all the like some of the best matches. What were some of the favorite matches that you got to work over your time at PWX?
First one that comes to mind was Chip Day versus Davey Richards. Because to me, it reminded me of one of those matches when I originally started reffing that I couldn't keep up with. But now I was like, all right, let's go. Like let's because these guys, they win, and it was hot in that building. I want to say I was in Cabarrus, but it was hot. And being able to not only stand the elements of the building that you're in, but to be able to work with the talent that I got to work with was unmatched.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's another thing with wrestling is like these are performers that are having to operate like you mentioned earlier with Impact, like the Extreme Cold, or like working at like the Firestar training school. It's like literally a sauna. Like there's so many different elements, or you're working outside like in the raging hot, and like the wrestlers get to go back, but you get to go back for like maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then you're back out there.
Right.
It definitely takes a toll, and like we've talked to a lot of people that say wrestling conditioning is a lot different.
Yes.
I think those are one of the reasons why, because like you're never gonna have like optimal, unless you're working for like WWE, you're never gonna have like the best conditions possible.
That's the truth. It's like, at least for referee standpoint, if I had a track star, I would tell them run as fast as you can, and I would follow behind them in a golf cart, and then immediately go stop, and make them stand there for a second, and then go again. Like that, because refereeing is all stop start.
Yeah.
So it's like with the conditioning, you can be conditioned to go all day long, but are you conditioned to go and then stop?
Yeah.
And then go again. That's as an example of how the conditioning would be different.
Oh yeah, for sure. for PWX, you said your favorite one was Davey Richards and Chip Day. Chip Day underrated, I think. A lot of people.
I agree, very much so.
You know about him, but what would you say is the match that like everything was there a match like where everything went wrong, or like do you have any like fun anecdotes of like?
I do. Okay, to call back to our Bell story earlier. It was one of the very first shows I worked for PWX, and the match was Lance Lude versus Zane Riley. And the finish was supposed to be a time limit draw, but there was no bell. So the ending spot was both of them were going to be on their knees, and they're just trading punches. And at the apex of the trading punches spot, the bell was supposed to ring. So you get the, it's like I'm waiting for the bell. The crowd's at its apex. They're all cheering. I'm not supposed to know when the time is up. Like, that's somebody else's job. So what? As Zane Riley's throwing these punches, he yells to me. He goes, "Where's the fucking bell?" And I'm like, "I don't know, brother." And so I just like acted like I did something that I said earlier in the podcast never to do, where I basically did the spot where it's like, "Hey, ref, what's that over there?" But I did it for myself. I was like, "What's that? Huh? Oh, time limit draw? Okay, ring the bell." And I just looked at the ring announcer as if the ring announcer was talking to me. Yeah. Like trying to get my attention or something. So I was like, that's the only thing I can think of in this moment because there was no bell. There's nothing else I can do. Yeah. So that was
it's a very Zane Riley story too.
I love Zane.
Yeah. We had him on the show, and he said had a story about working a match with John Schuyler where he poured milk on himself because they were working at a high school instead of beer. And so by the end of the match, he said that it was just disgusting.
Oh, he was so sour.
Yeah. Were you there for that?
I wasn't there for that one.
Oh, okay.
I want to say I started with them in 2015 and then went all the way to the end.
Nice. Did you get to work the Minoru Suzuki Anthony Henry match?
I did not. Chris Wiggins did. He did a phenomenal job.
Yeah. I kind of want to start a feud between you and Chris Wiggins. We've had him on the show. He's a good friend of the show.
Well, it's funny because Chris actually was the owner of the company that I had my first ref match in. Okay. That was in my hometown because we're both from Augusta. Okay. And so it's funny that you say that because that would be really entertaining. That'd be a lot of fun.
So you're aware of the Miami Bad Boy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think more people need to know about the Miami Bad Boy. That was our like first ever interview.
Oh, cool.
And we were talking to him, and we got to the Miami Bad Boy part, and I think we spent like almost the rest of the interview just asking questions about that. I was like, how is this not a story that's out there? Like, you see this guy with the mustache, and he's the Miami Bad Boy. Yeah, Chris is awesome. Kind of a segue. We kind of hop all around with this one, but you and Chris both work together in DPW. What is it like being involved with DPW? Because I feel like I personally wasn't like around for PWX. I like got into the indie scene afterwards, but I feel like there are definitely some comparisons that can be made as far as like what PWX is doing and what DPW is doing now. So what's it like working there?
I love it. It's one of my all-time favorite places to work for. And the cool part for me is that I never wanted to get – I'm not a big politic guy. I don't want to go, hey, so-and-so shouldn't be over there or so-and-so should be. It's more of a thing where, you survive on your merits. You survive on the work that you put in. And so I was hired strictly when DPW hit me up for the very first show because I've been with them for every show and I've only missed 2. And I was with New Japan when I missed them. And that was the only reason I missed it. Yeah. And I got hired based on my merits because they were asking everybody in the locker room, hey, what referee should we bring in? And my name was brought up unanimously is what they told me. Yeah. And I was like, that was just the coolest thing ever. And then like, they're all very respectful, very knowledgeable. They ask questions. Yeah. They're getting their feet wet in this whole arena and they're doing a phenomenal job. Like I couldn't ask for better people to work with. And ever since my diagnosis, they made it a point to let me know and keep letting me know, like, hey, you're still here. Like, we still can fight. Like, I produce the referees now for DPW. So I'm back there at the monitor during the show. So, like, they still keep me involved and everything like that. And the best part is I don't think they know about me being a manager before, so they don't know that I can talk. So I might actually pitch that idea with me and Wiggins.
Yeah. Call him out like
oh god, we both be semi-trained. I mean, I'm semi-trained. I know he's trained, so
yeah,
we might be able to pull off a match. Who knows?
Just gonna spitball an idea. Maybe you he does a finish, you come out and you're like, that's the worst fucking finish, or that's the worst fucking 3 count I've ever seen.
Oh man, there's a way we could do it. That'd be fun.
Yeah. When you started with DPW, did you have any idea it was gonna become what it is now?
No, honestly, I try to keep my hopes up for all the shows that I work on. But I could tell after that first show that like this place was different. Like these guys they didn't operate the same way I'd seen most promoters operate.
Yeah.
And again, like one of my favorite things about them is if they don't know something, they have no problem saying that. I love that. Like, okay, if you don't know something, great. Tell me you don't know it, and we'll both go find the motherfucker in the room that knows it.
Yeah.
No, that's 3 people that now know this. They're even better.
Yeah. Like the first show we went to is the one you were talking about with Lucky Ali and Jay Malachi. I think we've missed like 2 of them since then, but like it's something that like kind of reignited my love for wrestling again. Like I was kind of like watching on TV, like there wasn't a whole lot of local wrestling to go to.
Right.
But like from like ultimately from DPW, I would say that like that it kind of sparked us to like do this and get involved, and like now we're going to Firestar shows, now we're going to like these shows, and we're kind of like finally understanding what all North Carolina has to offer. But they kind of brought something that wasn't there before that probably was very similar to PWX. What is the favorite match for DPW that you have been able to work?
I'd have to say at this point the Colby Carino Lucky Ali match.
Oh, that's
that one, and mainly because at this point I had as much fun as I had in the match, but that was the last match that I got to ref before everything started to crumble. So
yeah,
like I love that that's my standard from where I get to come back from. Okay, if I can at least do that, I'm good. And like I was bleeding, Lucky was bleeding, Colby was bleeding, like it was an insane match.
Yeah, and to kind of when you to call it back to like the beginning, you're talking about doing the count outside of the ring, or at the Impact final deletion, and you get the rocks in your hand. Do you go into like a match like that knowing, hey, I'm probably gonna have to like snap some thumbtacks, or there's probably gonna be glass in my hand, and does the adrenaline kind of take over for that?
So because I had so much going on that day, I really didn't get to talk to them that much about the match. But I knew it was the Carolina Warfare match. But that, in my mind, that could mean anything as far as what weapons could show up.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't make sense for me to know that there are light tubes under the ring, and then just happen to have my handy dandy light tube gloves. Like to me, that character-wise, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a barbed wire match, hell yeah, I know there's going to be barbed wire. It's already advertised. I'm going to have gloves. Yes, that makes sense. I don't know what these guys are going to pull out. That should be my mindset. So I chose not to have any gloves or of any kind. And so I remember Colby. There's a moment, you can watch it in the playback. There's a moment where Colby goes through the barbed wire door, and I'm leaning behind him, and the whole time I'm talking to him. And at one point, I just hear him going, fuck, fuck, fuck. And so I leaned in and I said, brother, your best bet's just to sit straight up. Like, don't twist, don't turn, just Undertaker. Just sit straight up. It's your best bet. And so he goes to do it, and the camera zoomed in on both of us, and you see my face, and you see me go, God damn it. I was like, no, I didn't mean for that to make it. But it was just like that real moment when I saw it, like literally ripping his skin. Like,
So, sidebar city here tonight. The gloves are they not just like plastic, like medical gloves, or are they actually padded?
No, they're not padded. They're usually just the black medical gloves. Or tattoo gloves.
Okay, and like the reason for that is just like safety, like, or at least like
if somebody's bleeding in the ring to where like it's a lot of blood, a lot of times, and usually it's for insurance purposes.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, it's another thing that we see as fans, and you probably assume, but always good to know for sure.
Right.
Yeah, that match was very crazy. We were fortunate to see it live, and it was wild.
It was an awesome crowd too. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of a Carolina Warfare match, what would you say is the favorite crazy stipulation match that you've ever had the opportunity to work for or work?
So for me, the craziest outside of that Carolina Warfare match would have to be, and this is just a personal moment for me. When we did the New Japan show in Chicago, they actually had a Chicago street fight, and I am a huge fan of a street fight.
Yeah.
And being able to announce that in Chicago, my wife was getting annoyed with me because every time I go to take a shower, instead of singing, I'm like, "This following contest is." She's like, "I think you've got it. You're good. You don't have to say it anymore."
Funny that you mentioned you're a fan of street fights. Do you have a Mount Rushmore of street fights in wrestling?
First one that always comes to mind for me is Shawn Michaels Triple H SummerSlam 02.
Uh-huh.
It's just one of this is a story that was told, and I was a huge fan of Triple H. I never saw anybody bump like Triple H. He made you think that it was he was actually getting his ass. I believed it with him, So, and then that was my introduction to Shawn Michaels, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Had no idea about WrestleMania 10 or any of that stuff, so I had a bunch of homework to do after that.
Yeah, I learned about Shawn Michaels in 2005, so I definitely
Right.
Maybe for you, but I feel like it's a different Shawn Michaels.
Yep.
You learn about the Shawn Michaels who's out there workhorse Shawn Michaels, and you're like, oh, this dude's an asshole. Oh, he did all this, and it's just oh, okay.
Right. You could tell when he came back, he knew where to take it easy.
Yeah, for sure. I guess for matches that you've had, you'd say that the Chicago Street Fight is one that you're involved with. That was up there. I would say the least favorite, but what's a match that if you know you're having to work it that you're just oh fuck. Or is there one?
And it wouldn't be big on the list. But outside of selling, I would say a cage match. Because there's not shit for me to do.
Yeah.
They can literally do whatever they want to. And all I have to do is wait for a set of shoulders to go down or a submission to be locked in. So just from the standpoint of I wouldn't have too much to do, now don't get me wrong. There have been nights where I was just so tired that I was like, well, okay, I'm going to take the cage just because I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Awesome. I think this is all sidebar, so I'm going to stop saying a sidebar because usually I try to take it one century line, but that's gone tonight. So
yeah, no, you're good.
But as far as my wife went to her first wrestling show at the last Firestar show, the one with.
All right. Yeah, I was there.
One of her big takeaways was Yo-Yo's reaction in the match, how she was reacting to the person getting punched. How does the psychology of being a referee? What are some of the things that maybe people don't realize that you guys are doing that you kind of do that adds to a match? Or you?
So I've been in matches before where the guy was kind of new to the whole process and never hadn't had too many matches, and so when you're working on television, the referees actually talk a lot more than is heard, and it's usually all under our breath as we're walking by. So there'll be times where for WWE, for instance, let's say a match is going on and one wrestler's beating down on another wrestler and they want that second wrestler who's getting beat down to fire up. In my earpiece, I'll hear tell them fire up, fire up, fire up. So I'll just walk down like I'm checking on them. Hey, do you want to give up? Fire up, fire up, fire up, fire up, fire. And then they know. So little secret messages that are being passed here and there. And a good referee can do it and you'll never know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that you always see the referees getting down there, and you know that they're probably talking to a message, but it's not something that people really know. Who are some of the referees that you looked up to or studied, or some of the takeaways that you took away from some of your predecessors?
So once I started reffing, I was watching all Attitude Era at the time, and I would just watch whatever referee was on there. I would just watch them and get my critique then.
Yeah.
And Jack Doan was always one of the ones that, like, he had a tremendous slide. He had great selling. He was always one of the ones that I always enjoyed when he was working. Or if I was a fan of Kyoto, because Kyoto would get those near falls, like those 2.99s, and I'm like, man, like it wasn't until I saw one of my 2 counts in slow motion that I realized just how close we get sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jack Doan, Kyoto. Mike Goga, one of the referees from Firestar. I trained him, and I remember after about a year of working with Mike, I was in the back, and I just kind of had a little conference to myself because I was watching his work, and I was like, man, I think I may have taught him too much. Shit, he's really good. Like, but Mike was the one that I would travel up and down the roads with on New Japan. So it was basically, us just talking about wrestling for the 14-hour drive from Charlotte to Miami, or the how many ever hours to Chicago or to Nashville or wherever.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time in front of a U-Haul truck. That's
yeah, I bet. You mentioned you've trained a lot of people. What is like the first day of referee training look like, or what is the process of being a ref? Like, what are considered the basics?
So the basics are uniform, volume, and sorry about that. Uniform, volume, and wingspan, as I call it. Because if you, like I said, in those moments where you accidentally hit 3 and it's only supposed to be a 2 and you need to wave it off, it needs to look like a football call. Like, no. Like, it's one person letting thousands of people know one thing at the same time. And he doesn't have to say a word. It's just his arms.
Yeah.
But the uniform is most important. And if you can't get loud, then it's going to be hard to be a referee because you have to present this aura of authority.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're in charge. Whatever any wrestler wants to get done in that ring, that's great and dandy, but doesn't get done without a zebra standing in the corner.
Yeah.
Period. So, and it's one of those things too where if you don't get it at first, that's fine. It's all about, can you be teachable? Can we? Okay, hey, we noticed you did this. Like swimming is something that's famous for referees. When they go down for the count, and as they're hitting one, their legs are kicking like they're in a pool. We call it swimming.
Yeah.
You try to avoid that if you can. Now, sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's kind of hard to do depending on where you're having to go for the pin.
Yeah.
But little things like that, signaling back to the referees, like letting them know about introducing them to the technology of the earpieces that a lot of companies use. Excuse me. And it's just one of those things where, can you stop and start? Like that's where that conditioning really comes in, because I worked with guys like Jonathan Gresham who will go into 1-2, no, 1-2, no, 1-2, and there'll be 8 or 9 of these damn things. And so you got to be able to keep up with them on each one. And not only that, but time your 1-2s to where they don't run into each other. So it's not like 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. It's 1-2. Oh shit, 1-2. Oh, 1-2. And then like I said, there's a science and an art to what we do. And if you understand the math and the science, it makes it that much easier.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have like wrestlers that are like your favorite to work with, or like?
I love working with Lucky. Love working with Jackson Drake. Jackson Drake's a personal friend, so it's when you get to it's one thing when you get to go in there and work with talented people, but when those talented people are your friends, it makes it that much better.
Yeah.
TGA Moss is another one, really good. Oliver Sawyer, he's really good. If I just read off the DPW roster alone, I mean, that'd be pretty much anybody in there.
Yeah, I have another sidebar question. We had Oliver Sawyer on recently. Mm-hmm. Would you say that he's an asshole?
Not to me.
Okay. Okay, that's all I'll say. But yeah, he's great. All those guys that you mentioned, like a lot of the Firestar, like Grant Watts, like some of these guys that are But who are some wrestlers that are like on your bucket list to referee a match of?
If I could ref Ospreay again, that'd be fun. I'd like to ref Moxley. I've worked with him on shows, but I've never had a chance to ref for him.
Yeah.
just to see if I was at that level,
Yeah.
or where I would need to work. Because to me, it's not even about always, okay, even if I wasn't at that level, okay, what did I learn? Where can I, and it's all about the growth for me. I would say Moxley, or if I could, and this would never happen, but if I could work with debut era Abyss, like that would be so much fun. Like I would sell the shit out of that character. Like it'd be so much fun.
I've got a few more questions because I want to be cognizant of your time tonight. What is the least favorite ref bump that you've had to take?
Ooh, I took the Bray Wyatt crossbody from TJ Boss.
Okay.
And he told, so they were nice enough to hit me up a week or so before the match itself to be like, hey, are you cool with this? And I have to, being married, this, you have to run all the spots by the wife. So her first question is, who is it? What are they doing? Okay, that's fine. Or no, that's not fine, or whatever her answer is.
Yeah.
But, and this is because I had no idea how much of a hoss TJ Boss was. He hit those ropes, and brother, like, I'll have to send you the clip of it, but he hit me so hard, like I did a full rotation and almost went out of the ring. Like, the toes of my shoes were touching my eyebrows. Like, I was like, this is not right. This is
Yeah, I could definitely see TJ Boss doing that. That's I think a very good answer, and I don't think many people would argue with that on that.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. He was very safe and he took care of me. But when brother, if you get hit by a train, you're gonna know you got hit by a train.
There's some things like a JD Drake chop. Like, there's only so many ways. Yeah. So we got the dream opponent. We've got the ref bump. What would be your all time, any wrestlers, alive or dead, in their prime? What would be your dream match to referee?
I wish, if I had it my way, to ref Steamboat Savage from WrestleMania 3.
Okay.
Because Dave Hebner did a phenomenal, it's one of my all-time favorite just ref performances ever.
Yeah.
Because at one point, there was a really close near fall, and to let 93,000 people know in 1987, all he did was lift his foot up and put it on the rope. No! And let 90,000 people know. Like, I'm just like, oh, I love it.
Yeah.
For me, it's going crazy. Yeah, definitely Savage Steamboat from WrestleMania 3.
That's awesome. And then I guess this is kind of like your bucket list. Like, where do you want to be, when you're taking a look at the end of your career, 20 years from now? What do you want people to remember you by?
How hard I worked, and how my goal every night was to leave wrestling better than I found it.
Awesome. I feel like there's not a lot of people that are looking to do that. So that's definitely awesome. And like you mentioned earlier, you're working the DPW shows. I see you running around. I've seen you running around the 5-star shows. Like, you're not just in the referee. You're there to make sure everything moves smoothly, and it definitely shows. We always end on one final question, and you've mentioned a few of them, but who are some wrestlers, or also some referees, that you think more people should know about?
I would say anybody on the DPW ref staff, especially Chris Wiggins, because Chris is another one of those guys that works his ass off. He does a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
I would say Yo-Yo and then Mike Goga, the referees from Firestar.
Yeah.
Because Mike doesn't do social media, so not a lot of people know who he is. But he's so fucking good. Like, I get mad. Oh, you motherfucker, you're lucky I can't get in there right now.
That's awesome. And who are some wrestlers that you think people should know about?
Ooh. I say it wouldn't hurt if more people knew about Jackson and Lucky. And a lot of people already know about Lucky, but the more the merrier.
Yeah.
I wish people would talk more about, maybe I'm just not in the right conversations, but I wish people would talk more about Calvin Tankman. I enjoy working with Tankman.
Oh, Calvin Tankman. That is
one of my favorites.
Speaking of hard-hitting people, it looks like I don't think there's a lot of selling involved in a Calvin Tankman match. I'll put it that way.
No, it's if there is selling it, it's me naturally reacting to watching somebody almost get knocked the fuck out. But.
Yeah. Some of those fucking like I don't know how he does it.
If you go back on the DPW streaming service, DPW on demand, they actually is the very first episode of television they did. I want to say it was Fire. It was Calvin Tankman versus Everett for the very first time.
Oh yeah.
And there's a spot where he throws a punch, and the cell Everett hit was gold. And the crowd reacted beautifully to it. And like you said, it wasn't very much of a sell on my part.
Yeah. Sidebar again. Did you have the opportunity to work either of the Takeshita matches, or there was 3 of them actually?
I want to say I worked him. It was the second night that Everett and Tankman worked. Can't think of the name of the show off the top of my head.
Colby?
I think it was him and Colby. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I got to do that one.
That's another one that's like everything that dude does is like, for me as a wrestling fan, he's like the perfect wrestler. Like
just the way he operates and the way he moves in the ring.
He's like a real life Superman. Like imagine if The Rock had like his ability, like
right,
just next level stuff. But another guy that like hits hard and definitely you don't have to sell as hard for. But this has been really awesome. I would love to have you back on, because like we didn't barely talk about New Japan. We didn't really talk about all this other stuff, but I've had a lot of fun. Super excited to see what the future has for you. Hopefully we'll see you on TV soon so that we can brag. And all I request is that once you do get on TV, you come back.
Oh, absolutely.
But this has been great. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great night.
All right. Thank you, boss. Thank you for having me.